Personalities in the studio. Redwan Ibrahim Asante is a sports journalist who worked with various networks across Africa and around the world. He currently works with Joy FM and is in charge of sports there. How are you, sir?
Fine,
all right, and I have Baba Tando, well, used to go by the name Rashida, but now let's go to our personality who is looking at issues around the celebrations this morning at the Accra Sports Stadium. Justice Bedu, a man at the event and trying to look at the subject for us. Justice, if you're there, please take it from here. Okay. Of the Accra Sports Stadium, and well, the seats were not like this during the event, and we know that the other one was not as big as this one. This is almost or just exceeding the 40,000 capacity that was rehabilitated or reconstructed for the CAN 2008 tournament, and now you see this very edifice and very much different from that very sports stadium that witnessed that very gruesome or horrid event back on May 9, 2001. It was just around dusk on that very day. It was drizzling, and the fans of Accra Folk were excited because their team was up 2 goals against the almighty Kumasi Asante Kotoko. Well, it just didn't occur right, not only for the various groups that were supposed to ensure that security was upped at the stadium. The police, after some level of agitations from especially the Kotoko fans, decided to throw some tear gas, and then all supporters of both sides, they went amok. Okay, so Justice Bedu is ready.
The Accra Sports Stadium, but then later changed to the Ohinijan Sports Stadium. Now, this stadium has seen a lot of tremendous change in terms of infrastructure. 13 years ago, this whole facility back here was not there. It was this construction was done prior to the organization of the CAN 2008. Now here, 13 years ago, 127 lives were lost in a tragedy that resulted after clashes, after the police overreacted, when supporters started throwing waste and sachet water onto the stadium in a match involving two of Ghana's most successful clubs, the Accra Folk and Kumasi Asante Kotoko. We are here to follow up on what has happened and what has changed 13 years on. As we find it now, it's a serene atmosphere and early hours of the morning, and this is what usually happens within the day. You find people training in the empty stands. You find other women and men also running on the field. One significant thing that has changed now is if you come here, you have now an ambulance service stationed in this particular stadium, which means that in case of any incident that like what happened in 2001, we will now have men who would be able to deal with the situation in terms of conveying people or people who would have been hurt in terms of any accident to the nearby hospitals. There is a health facility inside the stadium, but as I learned, people usually sometimes they are overburdened or something, and then they would have to be taken out of the stadium. So that is exactly the situation here at the Accra Sports Stadium, now known as the Ohinijan Sports Stadium. I have gotten in touch with some of the ambulance service personnel who currently work at the stadium, and I would want them to tell us what they do here and how their work has been, especially after the May 9th stadium disaster. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
My name is Justice Bedu. What's your name?
My name is EMT Kudia Oselom.
I see. So you work here with the ambulance service. Tell us what you do.
Thank you. I work here at Accra Sports Stadium. First, our motto is timely care saves lives. And we personnel as CMT were posted here to this stadium because of during the stadium disaster. So as we working here, we work here internally and externally. That means we work we treat and transport here. So during some football matches, we sometimes stand by. We deploy our men to stand by so that they will watch the stand, where in case of any incident or any casualty, so that we will run and treat the person and transport the person to the nearest hospital.
I see. Now you also work with the ambulance service here, and have worked for some time now. What do you think has changed in terms of what happens here especially during big matches like Kotoko and Hartlepool, that was not the case before the disaster?
Okay, first of all, my name is Shadrach Kojojemfi, and I see this as a when the matches goes on, we be in the back of the whole thing, and some of our players, you know how they normally hit themselves and all that. But doing that, so far as we be in the cover of the whole scene, I think everything moves absolutely.
I see. What do you think with the kind of work that you do here? What do you think what do you add to the game?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. It's all about backup of the injuries and all stuff, because any wound or anything that comes across, as we backers, we run and then we transport into the nearby hospital or the near clinics to assist the patient, how he also feel okay. But apart from that, I can see the safety of this land is okay.
I see.
Yeah.
Tell me what happens in case there's a match and there are injuries to some people, fans, footballers, administrators. What happens?
Mostly, sometimes maybe, the fans, the two of them, if one score, you see, it will affect other opponent. So maybe through of excitement or on excitement, it can even fail. You know how it is.
Yeah.
So when it fails, you need to rush and then treat the person or conveying the person, as I was saying earlier on.
Yeah.
So these are some of the things whereby the two fans, when they score and your side also lose, you know how it is. Some people have shocks and all that, even include the players himself. Some of they can even feel their arms and all that. So these are some of the things that we do cover.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. And so when it happens like that, you are called into the scene.
Yes, when such incident happen, the medical team, that's the Red Cross, they intervene. So when they see that, when they suspect a serious injury, they call the national ambulance. But when there's a match between maybe a great teams meeting like that, we, the national ambulance, we mount our car here and we use AED. We use AED. That's a machine that we use, which any ambulance doesn't have. But we use the AED to, rescue those people, like people having a shock.
So Justice Beidou will again be somewhere around the Accra Sports Stadium speaking to perhaps those who also witnessed the event. And we know that the commemoration ceremony will also be convened within the vicinity as well. Well, so we have to now begin the discussions. And Redwan, where were you back then?
Home.
Home. And I know, as a keen follower of football, what was going through your mind at the time when initially the report started trickling in?
Yes, it began on a small scale until we had a report of the number that's been officially documented as 127. Initially it was 120, but we kept on monitoring, because it was a rainy Wednesday, afternoon or evening, under the floodlights. We all, couldn't do, much about it. Just had to listen to what was coming in from the radio stations and also the television stations with reports of, suffocation and the mountain death being recorded at 37 Ridge Hospital. So that was how come I got, to be filled in on what has happened, or the sort of decay at the whole at Accra Sports Stadium and the whole incident. But you know, some 4 years ago, I managed to go deep into it on a documentary on May 9th, and it's interesting how to speak to the pitch, you know, the groundsman at Accra Sports Stadium himself, you know, talk to him, and he gave me revelations as to what really happened and how the police officers had to fire, you know, the canister of tear gas into the stands and the fans racing down, you know, the then Adekoka stand, you know, and a whole lot of you know, issues. But the much talk about May 9th, the bottom line will be, so what are lessons? You know,
we'll talk about the issues about the lessons, and just like Redwan, you've also interacted with either individuals or personalities who have been well connected to this very event over the years. Usually, what is their story?
You know, it's usually one of an unfortunate incident. Nobody has, even people who were not connected to it, I mean, directly, have nothing good to say about it. It's usually one of sad emotions coming out here and there. And the story has always been that we're not learning enough. We are not learning enough. This thing happened, and then we see snippets of it happening once in a blue moon, still in our football. And well, I just would like to say that it's nothing good when you talk to those people. A lot of times when I speak to them, especially those directly connected, they tend to get me very emotional, because trust me, you don't want to lose the breadwinner of your family. You don't want to lose someone really close to you, a loved one or anything. Is not something that would put any smile on your face. I mean, yes, now we can just sit here and talk about May 9 and be okay 13 years down the line. But I mean, before, I'm not sure it was that easy to talk about.
You're not even okay, because you're sounding emotional all of a sudden. But Redwan, if we'd have to take it from there, you now do a lot of work. Either you're covering, you're making commentary, you're interacting with personalities who are sports administrators, or let's say football administrators. What have we learned?
Nothing. I mean, zilch, if you ask me, absolutely nothing. There's nothing we've learned from May 9th. You know, I always say that, yes, emotions cannot be controlled, you know, because it happens on the spur of the moment. You know, every game is different. The way supporters react to it, you know, different. But it's about, you know, disaster management. I feel that if on the day we had a strong medical team or even a backup plan, you know, lives would have been saved at Accra Sports Stadium.
And talking about the backup plan, you go around the sports centers, especially for the first Capital Plus Premier League, used to be the Globe Premier League, etc. You have some of the centers that may not necessarily be like Accra or Kumasi.
A lot of them.
A lot of them. Let's talk about first, starting from Accra and Kumasi. Do we have the facilities that are expected to be of standard that will make sure if somebody has a difficulty, whether a player or not, or they're sports fans who perhaps are in such difficulties, we have the emergency, perhaps the apparatus to make sure that we nip all those in the bud?
No, I think it will only be tested, but you can say, or you can watch, you know, the way, you know, the medical team, you know, are in place, and you feel that they are capable of dealing with the situation. But it's only when they are stretched to their limits, that's when you can pass them fit. What I can see is that there's, you know, in the GFA statutes, there is a directive that no league match is supposed to start, you know, if an umbrella, if an ambulance is not, you know, at the venue, you know. So every league match must start in the presence of an ambulance from either the regional hospital or the main hospital itself. But the problem is that what happens when the situation gets out of hand? How are people going to help? You know, do we have a lot of people? And even with a mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, how many people know about that? You know, I think it's about we trying to educate people on how to deal with this, and also with the security personnel in terms of crowd management. You know, why do you fire, you know, tear gas into the crowd, you know, when you can use alternative means? The Okujeto Commission, you know, went into this matter. A lot of things came out from there. Don't allow policemen to use, you know, armed, you know, should I say, ammunitions in the stadium. Don't bring in the military, not allowed to come in unless, you know, need be. You know, so what are we supposed to do? You know, at our stadium, are we still doing it? No. You know, refereeing decision will always be contested, you know, by fans. But how do they respond to it, and how do you calm matters down? At certain points, you have club administrators trying to fool the situation, telling fans to misbehave, and when the unfortunate happens, they sneak out. You know, they don't get to be blamed. But on so many occasions, they are thick in our face. They are the main cause, because if you calm your supporters down, don't go bananas, just calm down. It's just a referee decision. Let's play, let's continue. Matters die.
Roland, just before you come in, with just continue from where he left off. I mean, this ambulance issue. I mean, it's there. An ambulance must be there before the match kicks off. It doesn't happen.
You see, that's another thing.
The ambulance is not even there for you to know whether it is well equipped or not. I mean, time and time again, we've had people using their private cars to carry players, injured players, to the hospital or something. It doesn't happen.
That is when there are emergencies.
And then the only thing, I think, the only improvement now is that at the time, 2001, I'm not sure the stadium had, the Accra Sports Stadium had as many exits as it does now. So it shouldn't happen. But God forbid if it does happen, at least there are lots of exits. I mean, I think that's about the only thing. Apart from that, I don't really see anything
that you say physically.
No.
Now we know that it's in the statute. The Okujeto
Commission.
The Okujeto Commission also had certain tenets and recommendations made. Well, a contest over the years, and the criticism has been that it has not been fully implemented. What do you think the Ghana Football Association does for you to see and bear witness and say, appropriately, we've taken measures that perhaps will preempt any recurrence of such an event?
Well, it's rather unfortunate that I have to say it like this, but there's no other way I can say it. I'm not sure the Ghana Football Association has done enough, especially with this introduction of the club licensing. The club licensing, where clubs are required to do certain things, they are required to have certain things in place before the start of a certain league. I mean, they were supposed to start implementing them fully, not fully, in phases. The first phase was actually supposed to have started this season, I guess. But as it stands now, what has been done, I'm not too sure about it. But I think that, not to take anything away from them, I'm sure there's still a lot more that they can do. For instance, the security personnel at our stadia, I know that they have to do their own training, they have to undertake their own training, but I think that FIFA does have some kind of training for security personnel at match venues. And I think that the GFA, if it hasn't done in the past, or if it hasn't had any plan of doing it, should at least get those plans.
We'll talk about issues of security in the stadiums especially, because I have heard Redwan and a couple of the sports journals we have in Ghana say that instead of the security watching the stands and the fans, they tend to be watching the matches. So we'll see how interestingly that also goes. We have Joseph Yamin. Joseph Yamin is the Deputy Minister of Youth and Sport, and thanks for joining us this morning. Now, particularly for this very event that you're marking today, in what form is it taking?
Well, Roland, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think that it's a yearly affair, even though I have proposed that if we get to that stage where we learn something out of this very problem we are talking about, then we shouldn't be celebrating it every year, because every year we keep reminding people of the fatal incident that happened, and some sadness come into the system. But in as much as we've not learned our lesson, we'll continue to behave the way we behaved for this incident we are talking about to come about. Then there's the need to yearly remind Ghanaians of what happened. But what do we do? Every year we'll go to the site, lay rest, just give some words of encouragement, some advice to support it. And that is exactly what it will be this year as well.
Okay, we've been told that we haven't let our lessons very well, and especially the recommendations from the Okujeto Committee haven't been fully implemented yet, or even though they have been adopted, are not being practiced, so to speak, just to put it in plain language. By your own observation as a Deputy Sports Minister, do you think that's the situation?
Well, I've always said this, and I still stand by it, that the recommendations may be adhered to, but if fans do not advise ourselves, then we'll be having this reoccurring every time and then. I'm sure the advanced countries, you don't see any inner parameter, dividing that of the pitch and that of the supporters where they sit. Simply because when there's incidents like this, you may run to the pitch for cover. But have we gotten to the stage where fans in Ghana would accept the fact that the playing field is for the players and that we have a certain capacity? If should there anything go on wrong as far as the referee is concerned or the player on the pitch is concerned, won't we have fans jumping onto the pitch? And that is why they barricaded the whole place and divided the pitch as well as the so if we get to the stage where all gates of the stadium are open and there's a stampede, it means that we will have that issue because all the gates cannot accommodate the numbers that are in the stadium. We have 40,000 plus capacity in Kumasi. We have about 20 or 30 gates in Kumasi. The gates are not as big as to take about 1,000 people going through it without a problem. And so even if it's taking 1,000 people at a go, it means that we will still have more than 20,000 at the back of the gate and we'll still have a stampede. It is only when fans learn our lessons and say that football is football. We went to watch football. It can be a game of draw, win, and lose. Whatever the situation, let us go by the rules. There are rules that you can petition a match after it's been played. You have laid down procedures to go through your grievances and that. If fans go through these things.
I get all that you're saying perfectly. Now, if we would have to take all such occurrences in hindsight, and especially looking at the recent occurrence, if we have to talk on the continent in Egypt, where we had scores of fans also dying, just reminiscent of the May 9th stadium disaster we had also in Accra. It means that football is full of emotions. And fans will always be full of emotions. So how erratic they behave cannot be controlled. But what can be controlled is the steps that are taken. As a sports ministry, do you think that you as a ministry have taken those steps? Not necessarily you as the personalities in charge of the ministries.
Well, I disagree with the score that football is a game of passion and that people go there with their passion. The advanced countries are there. And I'm sure they are also following football with passion, as we are following it here. But they've also come to learn their lessons that, whatever the situation, I shouldn't go to the football pitch, come home with a different meaning. Some comes with cups, others comes with injury, others comes with whatever, just simply because we refuse to understand the system and the game itself. So whatever amount of security you put there, if fans will not behave, if fans will not accept the fact that these things happen in football, then I'm sure that it will bring the whole of the Ghana police in Accra to Accra Sports Stadium to watch a match between Accra and Kumasi and and fans do not behave. The fans will be more than that of the police force. And can we go there? So I think that we should be rather talking to fans more than this thing. We've put in measures in place. There are security personnel. When you go there, yes, their numbers are greater than it used to be. The stadium hospital is active. Some additional doctors are added every time there is a match. You see ambulances and others there. For the first time, we've insisted that police watch the match, the supporters, rather than watching the match. And it happened between Ghana against Egypt, that of Zambia as well. And I'm sure that in Accra, if you go there, you see fans, police watching the fans rather than this. But fans' behavior will always account for what we are talking about. And so we should be spending much of our time talking to the fans that let us try and behave at match centers, because our behavior would result in this, not the players on the pitch.
Okay. There's a last question I want to ask you about. Is it the fund that was set up to cater for the offsprings or perhaps the kith and kin of those who lost their lives, and especially for the young ones who needed to be educated from the beginning of the incident till now. What has become of it, and has it been fully utilized?
Well, these things happened in 13 years ago, and distribution of whatever was to be given to, family members. I just can't give you the exact situation as it is now, but I know that it was sorted out before we even came to power, and I have not encountered any problem of somebody coming to say that I have not received what was due me or something. But if there are any suspicions like that, I'll find out from the ministry how far they've gone with that.
Well, thank you very much. Joseph Yamin is Ghana's Deputy Minister of Youth and Sports, and he's part of activities to mark the May 9 stadium disaster, and those series of activities being marked, I think, in Accra and Kumasi, and he's in the Kumasi event as well. And thanks. Wanted to ask you some World Cup comments, but this is not the forum, so perhaps we'll have to call you some other time. So, Ridwan, your comments.
You know, I worked, you know, on my documentary. I found out from the trustee set up for the Stadium Disaster Fund, you know, and everybody was catered for. Almost everybody, you know, who was recorded, you know, let's say a child, you know, a widow, you know, children, everybody was catered for. Up to the 10th year, that was when I kicked in with my documentary. I met people. I met the chairman of the trust deed himself, you know, spoke to him, and then we spoke at length, and I was, you know, educated on how all those involved were given monies. You know, there was a seed money which was properly invested, and then, you know, it had a whole lot of people on the committee, you know, and that helped, you know, and that helped, you know, the whole process. So for me, you know, I don't think anybody else can go and then, you know, complain, you know, that he was never catered for, you know, by government at that time. You know, everybody was dealt with, and Yamin said it, you know, spot on.
Madam, security in the stadiums. Are you satisfied with it?
I'm not.
Because
still not.
Before we went, I was just talking, and the minister also made reference to it, but he only focused on the international match.
One international game.
Okay.
Okay. So let's.
I hear the police or the in England they have
in
stewards.
Ghana they call in foreign parts of the world
they call them stewards.
They call them stewards.
But in Ghana we call them security people. I hear they keep watching the match instead of.
Okay, no problem. Here's a little analogy. I have been to other match venues outside Accra Sports Stadium, and then the Kumasi Sports Stadium, the Babera Sports Stadium, and then the AC Point Stadium. What I see, especially in Accra and in Kumasi, I don't see a quarter of it in the other parts of Ridwan. Travels.
Bear witness.
He travels.
The last time I was listening to him from AC Point, so
yeah. Exactly. And what I see in Accra Sports Stadium, at the Accra Sports Stadium, is not what I see in other venues. If you have
give us a typical West venue or a venue that is not as developed as the Accra Sports Stadium. Is it a stadium for the Bekum Chelsea or somewhere?
Okay, we can talk about the Bichim Park. We can talk about Bekum Chelsea's home ground, that's the Golden City Park. We can talk about even these places are okay for football, but security-wise, I don't think it is. I mean, and how many police personnel are usually deployed there? What happens if the crowd is just uncontrollable? What happens? Can these number of security personnel deployed there, can they take care of the number of people in the stadium who might decide to misbehave? I think over the years, like we've been saying all morning, we haven't learned our lessons. It's just the fans who have learned to exercise some restraint. I think that's the only improvement. Apart from that, I'm not sure that we have done anything technically or anything from the side of the ministry or from the side of the GFA enough to ensure that these incidents do not happen again.
Redwan, we have GALCA, that's supposed to be the Ghana League Clubs Association, and we're also expected to be having a Premier League board and the Ghana Football Association. Why is it that we haven't been in a position to check some of these things, especially outside the main stadiums where we know that, well, they are better equipped?
Yes, you know, discussing this issue, I think is a national, it must take, you know, you must put on a national, you know, lens. Well, I say this because, one, fans go to the stadium, they started misbehaving on on a small scale, a smaller, or let's say low-profile matches, they were not punished. Nobody prosecuted them. So they carried on and replicated that at a bigger level or a high-profile game like the Hans Kotoko match. So it's not about the GFA. It's about the police service. If you arrest, a hooligan at a stadium, what do? You have to prosecute him. Let's not, just micromanage the situation and then narrowing it down. Let's say the GFA, the POB. It's a national issue.
It's a holistic thing.
Yeah. Because one, if somebody is prosecuted, if the police arrest a hooligan, nobody goes to intervene. Nobody goes to plead. He faces the law. He behaves well. Let me tell you, see, in Europe we see worse things happening. But the difference, the guy who threw the banana at Dani Alves has been picked up and facing prosecution. That is it. Nobody, you see, punitive measures come in and then nobody replicates that. Everybody's at ease. You talked about, numbers being greater or higher in Accra and Kumasi, but in other regions, how many police men do we have? How many are posted at the order in Berekum? How many policemen do you have in Berekum?
Well, we have Herbert Mensah